I'm no good at taking good advice, and I'm self-careless, so don't tell me twice that lately I've been so stuck in my head that I forget just about everything my therapist said. Maybe I'm self-helpless. Maybe I'm self-helpless. Maybe I'm self-helpless. Maybe we are all self-helpless.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Self-Helpless podcast. I'm Kelsey Cook.
I'm Delaney Fisher.
And today we thought we would do an episode on the biggest lessons we've learned this year, because this episode is coming out in December. So it's kind of like a wrap-up time to think back and see if you figured your shit out any more by December than you did in January.
Yeah. Oh boy, there's been a lot.
Yeah, not always the case, but we're trying. Before we get into it, so this is coming out on December 4th. I'm going to be in Tampa at Side Splitters Comedy Club this weekend. It's the last weekend of this year's tour. And then the Mark Your Territory tour starts in January. I'm going to be in Orlando and San Diego in January. And in February, I'm going to be in Tacoma, Philly, Jersey, Stamford, and then in March, San Francisco, Rosemont, Chicago, Minneapolis. And then, guys, I'm taping my next special April 6th in Madison, Wisconsin at the Comedy on State Comedy Club. After that, Sacramento, Salt Lake City, Vegas, Denver, Kansas City, and Baltimore area. So many cities. Go to kelseycook.com and get some tour date tickets.
Yay, that's so exciting.
Yay. Thank you.
Yeah,
what's going on with you?
Yeah, hey, if you like podcasts, which you're here, so we can assume so. I have another one called Career Crush. You can get it at my website, delaneyfisher.com. It's a private show, but it's completely free, and we talk about finding, work that makes you happy. It's really not a focus on how much money somebody makes, but really how they're living and how they're kind of weaving work into their life in a way that brings them joy and meaning and purpose and all of that. So a lot of interviews with people from, different lifestyles and backgrounds, totally different industries. Some of them have day jobs, some of them run businesses, some of them do both. A lot of creatives and artists and all that. And yeah, I really enjoy those conversations. I get so much out of it. And would love to have you over there. If you feel like me, where it's like, okay, we have no choice but to work. Like that's how our society is set up. Not like that we didn't really choose to do this stuff, but we have to find something that makes us as happy as possible or content as possible. And sometimes that's really hard. So, that's just a lot of what we talk about. Nothing is perfect, but, if you kind of figure out what your values are and the way that you want to live your life, we try to help you do that by giving you practical tools and insights over there. So yeah, delaneyfisher.com. Love to have you.
Incredible.
Yay.
Well, we have a quotable.
We do.
For this episode, and it was submitted by one of our sweet helpsters, Amanda. The quote says, "Being happy doesn't mean everything's right. Being happy means choosing to look where it's bright." Oh, gosh. That's fucking sweet as hell. That's by Emma Grace, that quote. I have not heard that one before, but
Me neither.
But yeah, that's a great quote. I mean, it's a little hallmarky. It's a little cheesy. Kind of,
It's a poem. A little bit of a poem.
It's a little bit of a poem, but it's nice.
It
sure.
is.
It's really nice. It's true. It's very true.
It is. It's like, I know for me, when something feels really shitty, I can always, even if I feel like shit, I can always see the silver lining of why something, like the thing that could be birthed out of it, that could be positive, whether it's a lesson that I learn or something. But I'm just like having that experience. I think that's such a good one for this episode. I'm like feeling both of those things. I'm like, there's so much silver lining that can come out of these situations that have felt really hard. But I also feel like shit, and I wouldn't have chosen for a lot of it to happen. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's like both are there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that we're both perfectionists, and I feel like we're always trying to make our lives as perfect or like optimal as possible. I feel like sometimes our brains, yours and mine, turn into little computers, and we're just like scanning every category in our life. Like, okay, how can we make this better? How can we improve this? Yeah. And I think it is a good reminder to be like, well, it's not going to ever be perfect. So you try to get close, but even that feels like a tall order.
Amen to that. And if you want to submit quotes that get on the podcast, you can join our Patreon community at patreon.com/self-helpless. You can submit quotes, recommendations that get read on the show, shout outs to your loved ones, and you can also vote on topics over there. So a lot going on over there if you want a little bit extra oomph of self-helpless in your life.
Yes. Well, I feel like you and I have both made a list of the biggest lessons we've learned this year. And I also thought, I didn't say this to you before we started recording, but it might be interesting to share what was our happiest or best moment this year, and maybe what was our lowest or hardest moment, if you feel comfortable sharing.
Oh,
We've done that before where we did like highlights and lowlights.
Yes.
So we could add that too if you want.
I might need a moment to mull that over, but I do have the other stuff on my list. Did you want to kick it off with what's your number one?
Yeah, in terms of the lessons I've learned.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like something I've struggled with, but I think is a healthy lesson to learn, is that sometimes it has to be a quality, not quantity, in terms of spending time with loved ones. I think as we get older and we're spread out sometimes from our family members or our close friends, it can become a really negative thing. I feel like it's been a heavy thing on me this year, is like wishing that I had more time with everybody in my life. But I think it's almost like the quote that was submitted today. Instead of focusing on like, oh, I wish I had more time with these people, trying to focus on like, okay, but when you get to have time with them, whether that's in person or over the phone, are you making it quality time? Like, are you present? Do you feel like you're really making the most of it? And, I moved here to Minnesota in January, like right at the start, like January, it was like January 1st or 2nd. It was really as the new year started. And that was super hard for me in certain ways because Washington has so many of my, longtime childhood friends, but also my family. And you guys know from listening to the podcast with my mom, having been sick the past few years and having dementia, I felt like I was worried I was going to regret moving away from her. Like, what if I looked back and now I'm having less actual in-person time with her? But I've learned that with this particular disease, I think it's really critical to like also take care of yourself and know that. Well, one of my friends who has lost their mom a few years back said, you're not going to look back and think about like all of these specific little individual visits. You're going to be thinking of like a really like an overview love of her and memory of her. It's not like you shouldn't beat yourself up if you missed like 1 month of visiting or something. So just trying to focus on quality time with people rather than freaking out about like, am I getting as many visits to people that I love as I can?
Yeah, that's a good one. Really good one.
How about you, Del?
I think the biggest one right now is that really recognizing and understanding, really for the first time in my life, that I've been very codependent in pretty much every area of my life, and what that actually means and looks like. We've thrown this word around the show before. We've had people on to talk about it. I thought I had kind of an understanding theoretically of what it is, but I've been really I have been forced to face that. And I heard a really great quote the other day. I was listening to, I think the podcast, it's for codependent kind of recovery. And the host name is Heidi Rain. So shout out to Heidi. She said this quote, I don't know if it's attributed to her or if it's a quote that she likes, but people who are, struggling with codependence, who maybe have grown up in an area where there was a lot of high conflict and stuff like that, where you cannot keep asking yourself how much you can tolerate, because you can tolerate a lot of bullshit. You have a very high tolerance for bullshit. You have to start asking yourself, how good can you let things get for you? And that changed my brain. And I think I'm really understanding what that impact of that kind of codependency that, just happened for me when I was younger. And seeing the way it's impacted me as an adult, I'm really starting to understand it more and implement it and feel the difference, what it's like to step away from codependent behavior.
Yeah.
And it is very hard, but it really does work. And it is very kind of freeing and eye-opening, in all the areas. So I think that's just my biggest lesson is that. And it has permeated all areas of my life. And actually what I'm finding is the more that I feel like I'm healing myself and I'm stepping away from those things, I feel that the need or want to accomplish stuff is decreasing.
Whoa.
Which is really weird, where you know me, right? I got my hand in a bazillion things and a bazillion projects in this usually. And I am really the desire is not there in the same way. There's a couple things that I'm excited about, but I'm not having a lot of those racing thoughts and urgency and all these things that I had. Yeah. And I think it's because I'm actually healing my shit. And I did not foresee that. So I think I've just realized I want my life to be my passion or passion project, not necessarily whatever my work is at the time. I want to do work that feels meaningful, but I'm not so attached to it. I'm not so attached to where, I am my work or I am my accomplishments. I'm not kind of everything was an upheaval this year in all parts of my life. And I think losing my identity a little bit was, it was scary, but actually liberating, where I'm oh yeah, I'm actually not any of these things. That's weird. That's actually really weird to think about, that I'm still here.
Yeah.
So what am I really? Not any of this. I'm not this accomplishment. I'm not this. So yeah,
Whoa.
That was, I know, that's where my brain's at right now. Who am I? And I promise I'm not high.
I was just going to say.
I am sober.
I was just going to say, by the end of it, I was like, did I take an edible? I mean, because it's just it's so profound. It's well, I'm not this accomplishment anymore, but I am still me. I'm still here. It is a weird thing when I think sometimes we don't even realize how much of our identity we are tying into these things around us, whether it's people or accomplishments or careers. And you go, oh, I guess I'm still breathing.
Yes.
That's fucking weird. Yeah.
It's weird. All you have is the present moment then. You can only be present. You're forced to, because there's nothing else going on.
Oh my God. That's going to stick with me for a long time, the codependency thing, where instead of asking yourself, how much can I tolerate? Ask yourself, how can I make my life better? Did I paraphrase that right?
Instead of asking yourself, how much can you tolerate? Ask yourself, how good can you let things get?
Wow.
That's the question codependents need to ask for themselves. Yeah. And I'm oh, wow.
I mean, that I have to write that down and put that on my bathroom counter. That has to be something I see every day.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. It's such a good one. It's one that really hit me. Every once in a while we had that quote that really is a life-changing quote. And that one for me was one of those.
Can I ask what in particular was happening in your life that made you go, oh, there is a pattern of codependency, and and everything. Like for people who don't,
Yeah.
I myself am not super familiar with codependency. I know like in
Right.
in being able to talk about it.
Yeah. What made it apparent what were things that were going on in my romantic relationship. That's what really brought it to like, hey, you can't avoid this anymore, and you cannot ignore it anymore. This has to be dealt with.
Yeah.
And so that's what made me realize, okay, I have to start acting a different way in my relationship, my romantic relationship. And then I think it just kind of is like, wait a minute, where else am I doing this?
Right.
What other relationships, situations, whatever, creative, where else am I acting this way? And so I think it just starts to permeate all the things. So I think like an example would be like, I'm trying to think of an example recently. Let's say an example would be like a friend reaches out and they said, hey, you want to go for a walk on Monday? And I'm like, yeah, that would be great. And then they're like, awesome. I'll let you know when I get off work and we'll go for a walk. I'm like, cool. I'm flexible all day. Let's do it. And then if that friend does not reach out to me Monday, I will not follow up and say, hey, are we still on for today at this time? Or, you know what I mean? I'm kind of like managing the situation.
Yeah.
Where it was left in that person's court to reach out and make a more substantial plan. And so I will just not do anything instead.
That's like you're saying that present day
me will now not do anything.
I
won't be like, hey, we still on for today, this time, right? I'm not managing that.
Right.
And
but past version you would like basically do the work of two people.
Yes. Past version me would have been like Monday morning, I would have had my calendar, reach out to that person and get a time on the books, right?
Sure.
And then, do that. So when I'm not doing that, things are, they are still happening, they're not happening, or they're just happening in a different way than I would have done it. And I am just okay with that. But that's basically an example that I can share that happened recently where I caught myself, oh my gosh, I realize that I'm the one who actually makes the, detailed thing. But if I don't, what happens? Do I see this person or not? Turns out that day I didn't see them. So I think it's just those little tiny micro behaviors that are so ingrained that I'm like, hey, just take a beat before you do something, because is this your responsibility? And if it's not, don't do it. Don't take on more responsibility.
Right.
And that's kind of it. I'm like, oh, so it's weird. It's a really weird feeling. Yes.
Oh, man. I just have to tell you, and by the way, I know I shouldn't feel this way. I've become a little self-conscious on the podcast about talking about my mom because I feel like it inevitably comes up in some form almost every episode now. And I feel a little bit like sometimes I worry the listeners are like, okay, yeah, we've heard a lot about your mom. But it's just like for me, the podcast is like one of the only times that I really talk about it in depth. Like I'll talk about it, with Chad during the week or like in therapy, but it's just like, this is such a healing place for me. And I feel like the conversations you and I have always make me think of things and I'm like, oh wow, I didn't even realize I was going through this. So anyway, I know it's a heavy thing and I know I bring it up a lot. It is just a big part of my life.
That's what you're going through.
Yeah.
Thanks.
When you were saying that people who are codependent have a very high tolerance to take on, is it like a lot of emotion you're saying, or a lot of just like tasks?
Yeah.
So
all of that.
Chad, over the summer we had visited my mom, and when we left, he was like, my God, you're like an emotional aunt. Because ants, like not AUNT, ANT. He's like, ants can carry like 20 times their physical weight. He's like, you're like an emotional aunt. He's like, I don't know how you do this. I don't know how you just like go through your day doing things when you've got the weight of this situation with your mom on you. And I, full disclosure, had like a pretty hard cry last night to chat about my mom, just feeling really like just in a tough patch about it, just feeling really sad. And I said to him, I was like, I almost sometimes want for like the mental breakdown to just finally happen so that I can feel that I've like hit a point, like some sort of rock bottom of like, I can't continue to feel this way, or I can't continue to give this much emotionally to the situation. But because of whether it's codependency or whatever the fuck has happened in my life, that has created like a very high tolerance for emotional stress or emotional anxiety. It's like I just continue to walk around with a very high amount of it on me, but I don't want to. Mm-hmm. But I think, like you said, because I just can and still technically function, I just do. Right. And it's really hard to like try to remove any of that when you're like, well, but I'm still alive. You're like, yeah, but like, are you healthy? Like, do you feel good? Not really. Right. So yeah, it's very hard.
It's so hard. And I think, if you're tuning in and like you have, I don't know, when you kind of look back, you don't really know where, at least for me, I didn't feel super separate from some of my caregivers. Mm-hmm. Like I felt like we were a full unit, right? Yep. Like it was a unit thing. And so it can be hard to individuate later as an adult of like, wait, okay, so I'm responsible for myself and that's it? I'm not also responsible for what, your tasks and your feelings and your emotions and what you need. That's not how I was, that's not what I learned kind of. So, it almost feels like when you start to do those things where you're like, oh my God, I can just be responsible for myself. That's what a lot of people are walking around doing. It almost feels like you're being selfish or mean or rude or whatever, but you're not. But, it's like, I don't get it still. I just don't. Yes. It's really hard to feel like you have over delivered in every area of your life for so long. And then when you stop, you're like, oh my God, I have all this free time and mental clarity. And what do I do with all this space that's mine now? And that is a weird feeling.
Yeah.
It's a really weird feeling.
Yeah. Whew.
I know, that was just my number one. That's just my top thing.
We're like halfway through the episode. Yeah. What you just said, all of that funnily ties. Funnily? Is that a word?
Yeah, I think it is. Pretty sure.
How weird that sounded in my mouth. I feel like it really correlates with a theme that we have brought up over and over on the show, which continues to be one of my things on my list for another lesson I've learned this year, is that like you have to build in time in your life to do nothing. Right. Like you have to build in downtime. If you're somebody who tends to lean more toward the workaholic end of the spectrum in life, it's like nobody will come up to you and go, hey, why don't you take a time out? Nobody's going to do it because you're an adult now. There's no recess. There's no whatever play dates with a friend that your parents make. It's like you have to decide when you're going to take breaks. Right. And Jesus Christ, like I feel like you and I are like very capable people, but it is to the detriment, I think, of our well-being.
Yes. And I think that's what tripped me up about codependency for so long. Because I'm actually very independent almost to a fault sometimes. So I didn't really understand what codependency could actually be. A lot of codependents are very like independent people, and then they can be fixers. And so I'm like, oh, I see. Because I didn't really think of, I think I had different ideas of what codependency really is.
Yeah.
On a different experiential level.
Yeah, I'm starting to also notice one of the downsides of my career is that my career is very adrenaline based. Like if you look at it on a chemical level, my job is very dysregulating for your health because you're flying out, you're doing these shows. It's hours of adrenaline. And then you go back to a hotel room, to a bed that's not yours, and you try to turn your brain off and get some sort of semblance of normal sleep, which it very rarely happens. And then you come home from a weekend of shows and you're just like sitting at your house. And I think even if you're tired, there's something chemically in your body that's like, yeah, but we got to feel adrenaline. We still have to do stuff to get that adrenaline because now that's what we want. Ooh. And so we've talked about ADHD, things with time blindness, and how sometimes I wonder if when I'm running late, if it's because like that part of my brain that wants adrenaline was letting me get too close to the starting time of something and then giving me a shot of adrenaline. It's just, it feels like a little bit of an uphill battle, unfortunately, with the thing that I love doing the most. Like I love my job so much, but it's not, you're not like a super healthy person doing this job. It's not normal. It's
kind of impossible to be because of what it requires of you, but like that, it makes sense that your body is feeling like it needs that when you do have space to yourself. That's like how it's been surviving for so long.
Yeah, I've been finding that it's harder and harder, especially now that touring started back up, to be still. Like I have been trying so hard every day to just do like 10 minutes of stillness.
Right.
Whether that's journaling, doing breath work, or just even sitting the fuck down without your phone.
Yeah.
And it's like this gremlin part of my brain is like, we don't want to. It's just like it is running so hard from just being still. It's very strange.
Fascinating. What's next on your list?
So I thought about this a little bit with the Beth episode, but a lesson I learned this year is how important hobbies are. And I think it's kind of scary as like time goes by really fast now.
Yeah.
And sometimes I will get to the end of a year and be like, oh, I didn't like once do 5 of my favorite hobbies. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
I don't think I played volleyball once this year. I don't think I shot hoops. That was nice. I think I baked like a handful of times. Just to really sit down and think about what are the things that I love doing that are not, they don't benefit my career. It's just like, I love doing these. Yeah. And, it's kind of a bummer. I'm like, wow, a whole year went by and I didn't do a lot of these things.
Yeah.
So that's a lesson I learned. It's like, again, nobody's going to make you do it. If you want to do it, you have to build the time in.
Yes. Oh my gosh. You know what? The hobby one is such a good one because there was something I want to bring up on Beth's episode that I didn't, where I really like, I want a hobby that doesn't turn into something more serious. Like I really need that. And when I went to that Irish dance class a few times.
Oh yeah.
And
I totally forgot about that.
It was really fun. I wasn't going to stick with it long term because it was like so late at night and all that stuff. But how they, from episode 1, I almost said, oh my gosh, from the first class, they asked if I wanted to perform with them, like within a few weeks or something. And then, the next time it was like, hey, do you want to, and I was like, I'm really trying hard not to let this hobby become this other commitment that I don't have the capacity for. And I feel like that might also be a good example of the codependency thing of like, if I wanted to continue the class, right? That I would have needed to say, like, I'm sorry, I'm not able to do that for you guys. Yeah. Like, I don't have the capacity right now. This is supposed to be a fun thing to blow off steam. And I would have needed to say that at some point versus, codependent Delaney would have been like, I really don't feel like doing this and I don't want to, but they need me. I have to go and do this thing now,
Yeah.
But I was thinking about that with my hobby of like, I need to be mindful about that with hobby stuff too. Of when I go in there or if I do something, I don't want it to really, most of the time, transform into something else that's like more of a time commitment. But that's a good one.
I love that you're so good at so many things immediately that the people are like, we need you. And you're like, listen,
they just have
everybody
not
needs
many
me.
people. They really
Guys.
just didn't have enough. And I look the part. Let's be real. Have you seen me? I look like the face of Irish dance. So
I just love it. Yeah.
Oh my
What's another
gosh.
thing on your list?
I think one thing is I have needed different things at different points in my life, and that is okay. There was this, I don't know why, I think it's just, I don't know, pressure of maybe our society or whatever, is that you have to like go all in on something and then never change your mind. Like I still think we're coming out of that a lot, but I just always felt like when I was changing my mind and wanting to do something different, it was a failure. Instead of just like, why do I have to see it as a failure? Why can't I just change my mind because I feel different now and I just do something different because I feel different? Why is that such a bad thing? And so I just learning to, like that's okay, and that just might happen to me every 5 years or so, and it's okay to just follow that next thing or feeling or opportunity that feels like a good fit. Like for those first several years of running a business and stuff, it felt like the best possible thing for me in my life. It was creative, it was exciting, it was all of that. And then, the last year and a half or so, it's actually felt like it kind of changed a bit. It felt like more responsibility than I wanted. It felt like more tasks that I wasn't enjoying versus what I was. And I, needed something different. I needed a different like balance. So just being okay with that. Like, it's okay to change your mind. It's not like you're a terrible, lazy, flaky person,
No.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the people who are maybe from an older generation who did stick with the first job they took out of school, the first career, it's not like they're necessarily happy 30 years into it. I think some people truly are, but
Right.
it's just like, it's so different for everyone. It's a fingerprint, It's like not one size fits all.
Yeah.
Everybody feels differently about that stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. And so like, just don't beat yourself up about it, kind of like, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
Another lesson I learned, there's a great quote we love, is if you don't take care of your wellness, you'll be forced to take care of your illness.
Yes.
And like the basic, one of the concepts of feng shui, that if you don't have your health, you don't have anything, because health is like the center of the guas or whatever, like it touches every other thing in your life.
Yeah.
And so a lesson I learned this year was just, I think the importance of getting like those sort of annual physicals, but also just remembering that whatever you've gone through in the past year emotionally or whatever life changes, it's like the body keeps the score, right? There are things that might be happening with your body that you aren't even aware of, that maybe you're storing things in a certain place that are changing parts of your body. And I know that the healthcare system in some ways is not, I feel like, the most user-friendly or the most accessible. And I've felt very frustrated at times, just this year trying to get to the bottom of some of my health issues, but finding out that I have a polyp in my uterus, that now I have to get a hysteroscopy. It's like, I'm so glad that I didn't stop trying to figure out what was wrong with me. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say, is like, if there's something going on with your body that doesn't feel right, don't stop until you figure it out. Because I've had several things happen this year where I was like, oh, if I had just been like, I don't want to keep trying to figure this out, I would still have this problem, and who knows if it would get worse. Yeah. So figuring out this whole, like, why is my period so fucked up for over a year now, almost 2 years, and finally just like continuing to push and push and push and be like, no, I really still need to get this figure it out and finally, I am hoping that the hysteroscopy will really help. And then also, I've talked a lot on the show about my jaw clenching at night and how that's affected all these other health things for me. And then I went to a true specialist about it, and they did these scans and found out I had like a deviated septum and a really significant tongue tie and these things that just structurally I didn't know. And now I'm doing the work to help fix that and all of that. So I just, I know it's not fun work to do sometimes. It's just like the most adulting bullshit of like making appointments and going, and it's not always fun, but it like you have to take care of yourself.
Yeah. Being your own advocate is so important because practitioners, doctors, there's just people too with their own opinions and biases, and they're doing their best, but like nobody's perfect. I know for me, like what you brought up, it's like I used to put people like that on a pedestal of like what they say goes and all that, and it's like, you know your body, you know what you need, like, so I'm glad you're doing all that, even though it sounds very draining. I had a dermatologist appointment yesterday for just like an annual check my skin, check the moles, because I also, like you, I'm very Irish lady, very fair skinned. I've had to have a lot of moles removed over the years, and she found one on my back that she was like, yep, I don't like how that looks, so they're doing a biopsy. But it's just like anytime something like that happens, I'm not like excited that she found something, but I'm like, I'm so glad that I took the time and I made this appointment, because I just think in general it can be really easy to let time fly by, and then you're like, oh fuck, I haven't gotten a checkup in years. Yeah, absolutely. So make your appointments. Go get your teeth cleaned. Go get your skin checked. All this stuff. Make sure you're doing okay. Definitely. A big lesson for me this year is I've learned that how I spend my money, if it's not an absolute 10, then it's not going to make me happy, and I'd rather save my money. Like for me now, it's like my money, it's got to be an absolute 10. And because I've realized that what makes me feel happy or content or excited about the future or safe or whatever is saving more than spending. And that's gonna, and I feel like that's going to just that's just going to kind of be indefinitely. I'm so glad that I got the phase of like, I spent a lot on myself. I got things that I never bought myself before. I really experienced all the different services and this and that. And now I'm just kind of in a place where I'm like, what do I actually love the most? Like what could I put away instead for future me and future me's goals and plans? So the way I'm spending is definitely different these days as well. Like I'd much rather, it's like going to that dinner or whatever that it's not our favorite place and it's just like kind of a whatever thing. I'm like, I would rather actually not do that and put that in the bank and eat at home tonight. You know what I mean? It's like, because my bigger goal would be to retire as early as possible versus buy things that are kind of like in the middle, right? Stuff like that, where I wasn't thinking like that probably even just a year or more ago. Yeah, that's become a big quality over quantity thing for me too. In the last year, is like just understanding how long things can last if you take good care of them, and being willing maybe to spend a little bit more on certain things that just, I just bought like a really nice suitcase, and I used to roll my eyes so hard at people who were spending all kinds of money on them, because I'm like, I mean, how can they be that different? It's a fucking box with wheels. Who gives a shit? But now that I had just like a reality check where I'm like, well, this is something you use every week. Yeah. Like way more than the average person. Yeah. And I get all kinds of shoulder pain from pushing my cheap ass one around. It doesn't roll very well. And it's just like, what are you doing? I mean, it's a business expense too. It's like, this is totally worth buying. So I know what you mean. Yes. I think another one, and you've actually inspired me a lot in this way, is to try to figure out what things you absolutely dread doing, Yeah.
And if it's possible to outsource them, to outsource them.
Yeah.
'Cause again, I don't know if I have ADHD. I do resonate with some things, but like executive functioning things, I feel like I do get a lot done each day, but there are just certain things where I really fucking hate running errands.
Yeah.
More than anything. And I feel very, very lucky that Chad really likes doing things like that. And so there are some times where like he is happy to go run certain errands that need to be done. And then I'm like, I will, do some podcast work for us or whatever, just things that he doesn't like doing as much. But whatever, if it's like within your relationship outsourcing or like hiring somebody, I think just being honest with trying to make your life as good as possible in that way.
Mm-hmm. Oh, amen. I love that one.
What else for you?
I would say that, oh my gosh, like finding community and belonging and stuff I have found to be so important. I know we've talked about kind of like support groups recently, like those types of things when you have shared experiences. I shared not too long ago on one of our episodes, like I feel like I have a hard time fitting into like modern society stuff. Like I just, I'd love to like live on a freaking Earth ship somewhere, and grow my own tomatoes. Truly. Like, I mean, like if that was more accessible, I would be out of here. But I realized that I was in a situation where I was around a room full of people who felt the same way in a lot of those ways that I do about sustainability or, certain values that we've shared. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't feel so crazy. Like, sometimes you just have to actively search for things where you're going to meet people who actually totally get it and they have those same feelings and thoughts too and whatever. And it just makes you feel a little bit more like, okay, this whole day-to-day life thing is a lot more manageable and doable than I thought. So like, I don't know, just finding that for yourself. And it might take a little bit of work, like whether it's an online thing or a job change or a support group. Like I realize how important that stuff is because I had been isolated for so long. I had been working from home by myself for like, I don't know, 6 years, 5.5, 6 years.
Right.
And so these are some of the first things that I've done where I'm like around a group of people again with a shared goal or common value. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot how important this was because we are in this like age of remote work, a lot of entrepreneurial messaging, a lot of do it by yourself or have robots do it or whatever the fuck. And man, that human connection is so important. My goodness.
Yeah. Could not agree more.
Yeah.
My last lesson that I wanted to talk about is learning how important a weekly or monthly check-in can be for your romantic relationship. Chad and I do it, and we ask each other a series of questions. I think I've shared on here before. Have I not? About like...
I think so.
Is there anything that you'd like to circle back to, positive or negative? What stressed you out this week? How can I help or support you better? What was your favorite moment together this week? Things like that. It's like, it's not just a like, hey, let's try to pick a fight or like find some shit to stir up and talk about. It's like also talking about things that we loved doing, good moments. But Chad and I just both feel so strongly about the impact of resentment on a relationship and how crucial it is to like just keep it clean all the time, like not letting things fester or build up. And so we've had conversations that, in the moment as we're having them, I know it's hard for us to like sit down and really communicate how we're feeling about something because it might feel uncomfortable. But it always, by the end of the check-in, we're both like, oh my God, I'm so glad we talked about that. Yeah. Because we both would have probably just like pushed forward and been like, oh, whatever, it's not a good time to talk or whatever. And I'm so glad that we continue to do that because it just makes us feel very strong. So I've really liked doing that.
Oh, I love it. That's
Yeah.
such a good one.
Well, those are some of our lessons. I don't know if you wanted to do a highlight and low light moment. If not, it's totally
Sure.
fine. I literally just, oh, wow, there's a deer right on my yard.
Oh, nice.
Wow. Two of them.
That's another
You
lesson.
guys?
Move to the woods, you guys. You'll see
Minnesota
deer.
living. That's so crazy. Just out in the middle of the day.
gosh.
Crazy, crazy. Did you want to do that, or do you just want to do
Yeah,
segments?
sure. I wrote it down. I wrote one down for each.
Okay.
Yeah. So what do you got?
I would say probably there were a lot of highlights this year, but I think one of them that stands out is that I bought a house. I mean, speaking of deer in the
Yes.
yard, that was it's just like the gift that keeps on giving every day to wake up here and feel so at home and just to like have let myself do something that was so scary to me. Like that's it's such a huge financial commitment. It's kind of like a permanence commitment, which has not always been my strong suit. I've been I've been a mover. You know, I've moved a million times in the past, 15 years. And so to do something where you're like, no, you're going to be here. That's like a big thing for me. And I just love it so much. I wish every day I have a moment where I'm like, I wish I could just like hug my house. Like I just want to like wrap my arms around my house and be like, I love you. Like I love it so much. It truly is a dream. I feel very, very fortunate. So that was a highlight. A low light, I know that I had wanted to talk about it on the podcast, and I don't know that I ever actually did. But I will say I think probably my lowest point this past year was I went to visit my mom it must have been in February, I think. And she didn't recognize me. And it happened in a way that was so different than what I would have pictured, because I was with her for like 3 hours and I knew she knew it was me while I was there during the visit. And then at the end of the visit, she just turned and looked at me at one point and was like, and who are you again? And I mean, there are no words for how devastating that feels. It's something that I think as a human, like there's nothing that can prepare you for your parent not knowing who you are. There's nothing like it felt like it psychologically broke me. It made me feel like I was being erased, because like your sense of self, I think like one of your first feelings of identity is that you are somebody's daughter and that they are your parent. And when that primary person does not know who you are, it's hard to imagine something more painful than that moment. And so she asked who I was, and I was like, I'm Kelsey, I'm your daughter. And then she was like, oh, okay. And then maybe 30 seconds later, she was like, I'm just worried I'm abandoning her. And I said, who? And she said, Kelsey. And I was like, oh, but Mom, I am Kelsey, and I'm right here, and you're not abandoning me. And, like I said, this was toward the end of our visit. And then I said bye and just had like a full breakdown in the car afterward. But I talked about it with my cousin afterward, and my cousin has said that there are a lot of times where my mom thinks that she herself is like 30 years younger than she is. And if my mom thinks that she's 30 years younger than she is, then she also thinks that my brother and I are 30 years younger than we are.
Right.
And so my cousin and I were talking about that. We didn't think that in that moment that my mom necessarily did not know who I was, or like didn't think that I existed. Right. I think my mom thought that I was like a child.
Right.
And so then she's looking at me like, well, you can't be Kelsey because my daughter is a child. And that was so, my mom, her whole life has A, been the greatest mom in the world, but B, like being a mom is it's like her driving force. It is taking care of her kids and making sure that they're okay is like her everything. So for my mom in that moment to be like, I'm worried I'm abandoning her, she truly, we thought that like she is there at the house she lives in and that her kids are her young kids are somewhere without her and that she's like left them somewhere. And it's like, I mean, what the fuck? Like, dementia is such a cruel disease that it can do that to somebody where they think that like they've been this amazing mom their whole life and their own brain can make them think that they have abandoned their young kids somewhere.
Right.
It's just endlessly a nightmare. So anyway, again, sorry to be so heavy, but that was, I mean, like, I don't really ever have words for it, but I have felt fortunate that it has not happened again like that this year. I mean, there are times where like right when she sees me, I can tell that it maybe takes her a second, or she'll be like talking to me on the phone and be like, oh yeah, Kelsey told me that. Like she in that moment will forget that she's talking to me.
Right.
And it's just the hardest, but so that's my highlight and my low light.
Yeah.
How about you,
Del?
Del?
For sharing all that. Gosh, I feel like the only thing that really sticks out is my low light, unfortunately, but some of the highlights are very like going to Ireland was just a trip that I always wanted to take since I was younger, and like just felt very connected to my roots, I guess, my lineage. And just seeing like where all the places where my grandfather grew up and all that was really special. And just anytime that I get to, I'm realizing how precious it is that like my siblings who are now adults, basically, how when we're all together, like home, together in one place in one room, like how nice that is, because everybody has different schedules and they're busy all over the place. And so I think a lot of my favorite, I don't know, moments and stuff is just like hanging out with my sisters and my brother and my family this year, and just being around them a lot. And I would say I am so grateful that I got a literary agent in the most unexpected way, because it was around a time where I felt like I had been talking about on the podcast how like creatively constipated I felt with like, what do I do with like my writing and my comedy and my jokes and puns and all that type of shit. And it's like, it's really weird when you used to have an outlet for that, and then the outlet, you don't have the outlet anymore, but you still have some of the desire to write things. And so I've just been creating a lot of cool stuff with her that has been being pitched and stuff. And I'm like, I don't even care if anything gets picked up, because it's just been so fun writing puns and things. And like, I'm just like, oh my God, I finally feel like I have like an outlet for these ideas and stuff. And so I think that's been really nice. And my low light is just that there was a big boundary that was crossed in one of my relationships, a betrayal of trust, and really, really shook me. And I'm just kind of getting over the shock of it. I feel like I'm in a much better place than I was just like a few months ago. And I feel the difference of, I don't feel fearful about like my future anymore. Like I'm really in a place where I'm like, oh, no matter what happens, like I know I'm going to be okay. And like, I'm more excited about my future than fearful about it. And that, that's taken, I don't know if I would have gotten there as quick as I have if I hadn't been involved in all the therapies and the groups and all that shit. And so, that's, that was the biggest blow. Because it didn't feel like an isolated thing. It felt more like, this has happened more than once in my life. And whether it was romantic or otherwise. And so I think it just made me realize, like, I have got to heal my shit. I have got to heal myself. I have got to understand what's going on and how I've been in these situations more than once. And I have to take responsibility for my part in it, because I don't want this to keep happening to me. Yeah. And I need to, whether it's, you know, something that I'm able to heal and move on from in this current relationship, or it's something that I just want to make sure in future relationships I'm going to be different. So yeah, that's the year in tiny little nutshell. That's the year. That's the year. Also, my grandma died. That was definitely a low light, but I'm also glad I got to be with her. So I had to throw my grandma in there. I think she'd be pissed if I didn't.
Yeah. Yes. I was thinking about your grandma. Yeah. Well, hell, what a fuck. This was a very adult year. You know, like a lot of like real shit this year.
Dude, it was my Jesus year, 33. I know one of my friends was like, "Oh God, it's your Jesus year. It's gonna be a fucking hell of a year. You know, it's gonna be wild." I'm like, "Oh yeah, it has been."
Yeah. Wow. So funny. We have an iTunes review of the episode that says, "Makes Monday mornings better. One of my favorite podcasts. I've been listening to this podcast for over 2 years, and these girls are amazing. They have honest conversations about real topics. It makes my work on Monday mornings better listening to Kelsey, Delaney, and Taylor if it is an older episode, but you may want to have some headphones because real topics are sometimes not safe for work." Yes, true. That is 100% true. Man,
what a nice review. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time to leave that. That's so nice. It makes us feel great. We love getting to connect with you guys however we can. So
I know I can't put into words how much it means when we hear that this has helped you in some way. That it makes your Monday mornings better, or just like that is so cool, because I have things and people like that in my life, and how meaningful that is to me. So it's just it's really cool that we are that for other people.
Oh, absolutely.
In some way, yeah.
All right, guys. Well,
anything like that, Kels?
I think I'm just gonna leave it with the highlights and lowlights. That felt like my segments.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Well, guys, also, I forgot to plug it in the beginning. Please check out my podcast with Chad called Pretend Problems, and come see me on tour. I'll be in Tampa this weekend, San Diego, Orlando next month. So many coming up.
Fabulous. And DelaneyFisher.com for Career Crush, the free podcast over there, some free resources, tips, media and career opportunities. We got some maybe events coming up, all that.
Yay.
Love to have you. All right.
All right. We love you guys. Bye.
Bye.
Maybe I'm self-helpless.
Thank you for tuning in to the Self-Helpless podcast. You can find our Patreon community, merch, and our individual work at selfhelplesspodcast.com.
We'd be thrilled if you shared this episode with a friend, left an iTunes review, or feel free to post it on your Instagram and tag @selfhelplesspodcast. Thanks, guys.